Hey everyone, it's Scott Hansen from NFL Red Zone reminding you to watch Sports Ballers, the podcast that gets you caught up on everything Washington sports and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the Sports Ballers podcast. I'm Corey Puffett, joined as always by Eric Meyer and Evan Ash, but a little bit differently today because Evan is not on Skype. He is here in person in our studio. It's awesome. We won't have to worry about any Skype issues this week. Of course, it also means we have to postpone finding out if my new laptop will solve those Skype issues in the future. But happy to have Evan here in person. Evan, how you doing?
Doing great. Just trying not to burst into flames in this heat.
Is it hotter here than it was in Georgia?
Oh, yes.
Oh, dear.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a little toasty.
How was the drive?
The drive was fine. There's, of course, traffic in Virginia and Fredericksburg, and some people got in an accident south of Richmond that slowed us down, but or slowed me down. Other than that, it was uneventful. No weather. It was nice and cloudy, so there's no glare either. Pretty good.
Awesome. All right. Well, we got a great show for you guys today, a special mid-afternoon session of the Sports Bars podcast because we've got softball this evening, the last game of our regular season. Speaking of which, Eric, last week we won.
Yeah. A-W for the first time all summer.
Our first win this year, and we crushed them. It was like, what was it, 19 to 6 or something like that, I think?
Yeah, it was a pretty thorough ass whooping.
Yeah, so today we get to play one of the two good teams in the league, so probably won't be quite so ecstatic next week. But
Oh, wow. I thought y'all were just defeated. Like, you know, the opposite of undefeated. Like,
Well, we were until this week.
yeah, we were.
okay.
Or
We
the
finally,
last week,
we finally won last week, so we'll see what happens tonight. But let's go ahead and get into things. Quite a bit to talk about, and let's start just kind of wrap up some things about the Olympics. The Olympics ended this week. I don't know if either of you or any of our listeners watched the closing ceremonies. I never really do, but all told, the USA came out as the winners. We had 39 gold medals and 113 total medals, which were both number one in the Olympics. Could have had 40 gold medals if we would just go ahead and make Puerto Rico a state already, but
And much to your chagrin, the U.S. men's basketball team won gold. I know you just
I wouldn't
hate
necessarily
them.
say that it's to my chagrin.
You said
I
you root
just-
against them.
I just, yeah, like
a couple weeks ago.
I root for the underdogs in basketball because we're all so high and mighty about it. But that doesn't mean that
We're
like,
high and
that
mighty
wasn't
about
your
everything.
reasoning
This is the
before.
United States. Nothing the
This
United
is
States
true.
does is wrong, according to the United States. So
This is true.
But we still root for everybody else. So.
I'm fine with us winning gold in basketball at the Olympics.
Sure.
I'm like
You're
I'm
fine
not
with it?
what?
You're fine with it?
I'm fine with it.
Like,
I'm not
it meets
ecstatic.
your approval?
I'm not super excited about it, but I'm also not devastated or
Well, that
chagrining
one
it.
win put us over the top in the gold count. So
Were you rooting for Slovenia or someplace? Like, what?
I wanted to see Luka in the final.
Yeah, all right. Fine with it.
I think it would have been pretty funny if like Nigeria had won gold.
Nigeria.
Because-
That didn't happen.
It didn't. China got second, 38 golds and 88 total medals. Japan finished third in the gold count with 37. And number 3 in the overall count, guess who? Not Russia.
The Russian Olympic Committee.
The Russian
yes.
Olympic Committee, because they got us all fooled. It's not really Russia, but it is, though.
Yeah, it's like the flag is just in pastel colors or something. It's not fully colored in.
And then congratulations to Great Britain. They got 4th in golds and total medals. Not really a whole lot else we really need to talk about with the Olympics from the past week. There was some, athletics, track and field stuff, a few other miscellaneous items that always kind of get held off until the second week. As much as some of the track events can be fun to watch, the first week of the Olympics is really where it's at. It's where just everything's coming at you left and right. It's a lot like the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. The second weekend still has some pretty good action, but it's just not as jam-packed full of excitement as the first weekend. So
Yeah,
it sort of loses its luster a little bit in week 2.
The second week has the marquee events of the summer games, and that's the 100-meter dash. Like, that is the single most important event, in my opinion, in the entire Olympics.
Sure.
That is the thing to watch. If you don't watch sports or you don't care about the Olympics, tune in for about 10.2 seconds to see who wins the 100-meter dash, because it's always a thrill.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add to that. But beyond that, not really a whole lot to talk about there. Quick side note on the Winter Olympics, which, guess what? We're only 6 months away from the Winter Olympic Games. What is happening here?
And it's in Beijing.
And it is in Beijing.
The Summer Olympics.
Yeah, site of the 2008 Summer Olympics. So the National Hockey League is having some difficulties with logistics on their schedule for the upcoming season. So they have a schedule put together that takes the Olympics into consideration, basically plans for a short break, the way that we normally see in the NHL on Olympic years. But there's not currently an agreement that guarantees that we will be sending professional hockey players to the Olympics this year. And if we don't, then they plan to use an alternate, slightly modified schedule that would use a lot of the same dates as the schedule with the break, but sort of eliminate some of the break. And so teams are starting to figure out their travel plans during that time period and the surrounding time period after and before that break. Where the games are going to be, getting hotel reservations, flights, and all that sort of thing. And if they have to call an audible and switch which really they don't, they could just keep the break regardless, but why have a break if your players are not going to be playing? So if they do change it, then that's going to throw a wrench into all these teams' travel plans. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to look at for those of you who are into hockey. I know Evan and I are not as big into it, and Eric really just follows the Capitals. I don't think he cares too much about the NHL as a whole, generally speaking, maybe a little bit in the playoffs.
I generally like to see who wins the cup. I always watch the ceremony when they raise the cup and stuff like that. But this isn't the first time that the NHL and the Olympics have clashed like this. I don't believe that any professionals played in the 2018 games, so it's not like they're always there. This has been an issue in the past, in the very recent past. I don't think any NHL players participated in the Winter Games in 2018, so if they don't do it in 2022, then it wouldn't shock me because that seems to be the direction they went before. But I think it's kind of silly that the best players in the world wouldn't be allowed to play. But if that's how they feel that they need to go, then that's how they're going to go.
Yeah, so I honestly kind of forgotten about that, and so I'm looking at the Time magazine article right now from February of 2018 when they talked about, I guess, the NHL just decided not to incorporate a break into their schedule, and so they didn't allow their players to go, which means like even for foreign teams, like Alex Ovechkin usually goes and plays for Russia, and he wasn't allowed to go and play. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on, a little bit of NBA news. Let's start with, our softball game got canceled for today. Field is unplayable. Well, that means we get to take our time, I guess, but that's a shame. We'll probably reach out to Sean and still try and go to Looney's or something tonight. But anyway, let's talk about Dennis Schroeder. Former LA Laker, turned down an extension during this past season that would have been worth more than $80 million. Figured he would test out free agency and try for a bigger deal. And so he signed this week a one-year deal with the Boston Celtics worth $5.9 million.
So, I mean, Corey, you're not great at math. I don't think this was that much of a successful choice for Dennis Schroeder because, was that minus $74 million?
Well, I mean, I guess that depends on how many years the extension was going to be. What's 80 divided by 6? Somebody help me because I'm not good at math.
80 divided by 6. I think 84 divided by 6 is 14. So
yeah, so was he going to be signing a 13-year extension, 14-year extension?
I mean, this was
probably not. No, so yeah, I'm thinking that this was an L for Dennis Schroeder.
Yeah, this is a big L at the bank account. And a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Like, somebody offers you $80 million. You say, yes, please. Right? Like, why would you... Gonna test the waters? Like, no.
Yeah, Schroeder didn't seem to have gauged the landscape, given the fact that teams aren't all that interested in handing out funny money to free agents like that unless they're superstars. And he seemed to think that he was going to get an 8-figure deal or a 9-figure deal. He was offered an 8-figure deal. So he decided to hold out and quote-unquote bet on himself. Well, the problem is free agency money dries up pretty quickly. So if you're not among the first guys to get picked up, when there's a guy like Kyle Lowry on the market who was picked up by the Heat, then you're going to have trouble finding a job because the Bulls signed Lonzo Ball to a decent deal, and DeMar DeRozan got traded, and Russell Westbrook got traded. And then that's kind of it. Everybody's got their point guard, and you decided that you were going to ditch the Lakers for quote-unquote greener pastures. Well, I guess they are greener in the sense that you're going to Boston, but they're not greener in the sense of you making more money. And this is what happens where the Celtics signed him with the mid-level exception, which is basically a freebie that every team gets regardless of their cap situation, where they get to sign a player to a 1-year deal worth $6 million. And so it seems like he miscalculated pretty badly, given the fact that he, one, thought that he could get $100 to $125 million, leaving $84 million on the table. But it seems like part of it was also driven by playing time, because he was not likely to see the court as much. It seemed like the Lakers were really interested in pushing him to the bench because Russell Westbrook came into the backcourt, and so Dennis Schroeder's role at that point would be a little bit reduced. So he was looking maybe for an opportunity to make money and also be a starting guard in somebody's backcourt. But then he ends up going to Boston, where they've got multiple guards that are probably going to be ahead of him on the depth chart. So it was just a loss overall for him.
The other thing to consider here is because when he turned down the extension, it was during the regular season, right? So like he didn't just turn down the extension and then go to free agency and get this much worse deal. He turned this down a while ago, and I would imagine if a team is offering you, $80+ million to remain with the team over, I think it was like 4 or 5 years that it would have been, you would figure that he's going to be kind of part of their plans during that time period. He's going to get some playing time. If they, like that might have meant that they wouldn't go after Russell Westbrook in free agency, which they ultimately did and traded for him. We'll get to that in a minute. So I feel like it was a bizarre decision for him to make if it's based on playing time and a concern that he's not going to get it. Because if they're paying you 80 something million dollars to ride the bench, that's serious funny money. I'm taking that. Like at that point, I don't care if I see the court. I've got $84 million or whatever it was.
That's Chris Davis land, right? Like,
yeah, like so there's that. My other question for you, Eric, would be this: why did he think that he was going to get a lot of money in free agency? Like, what were his advanced stats? What were his metrics like that made him think that he was going to be worth more than $100 million in free agency? Like, this is a guy who's playing third fiddle to LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and when you're playing third fiddle in that situation, honestly, I don't even know if he's really third, because I didn't even know that he was on the Lakers. I knew Kyle Kuzma was on the Lakers. I know a couple other players were on the Lakers. I didn't know that Dennis Schroeder was on the Lakers this past season until this whole news story broke out this week. Was he really playing well enough, that he could go somewhere where LeBron James and Anthony Davis are not and be worth $100 million?
Well, it depends on your idea of worth. All you have to do is find one sucker, right? But the thing is, Schroeder was added to the Lakers for the purpose of being a secondary playmaker and sort of that secondary scorer who can kind of spell LeBron James and not force him to shoulder the load of the entire offense, so that he could focus more on buttoning it up on defense with Anthony Davis to continue to make that team a dynamic defense, while Schroeder will help ease them into becoming a potentially dynamic offense to improve their championship prospects, because they were coming off a win in the bubble. But the Lakers were a very good team, obviously. They won the title. but they were not a perfect team by any means. And one of the issues they had was they lacked playmaking outside of LeBron James. So Schroeder was probably banking on the fact that had Anthony Davis stayed healthy and been in shape or whatever, and had LeBron stayed healthy, the Lakers probably win the title because they probably get through the West. I don't think they would have had much trouble with the Suns had everybody been on the top of their game. And then Schroeder ends up looking like a very key piece to a championship team. That carries a lot of value that a lot of teams would consider saying, hey, let's go pick that guy up. Let's pluck him from LA. The problem is Davis got hurt, and LeBron was never 100% in the playoffs, and Schroeder woefully underperformed in the postseason. He had 0 points in Game 5 against the Suns. As a guy that they brought in to be a scoring threat, he scored 0 points in a playoff game, in a critical game that they absolutely had to win because they ended up being down 3-2 and had to rely on a gimpy Anthony Davis to come back, and he lasted about 5 minutes in that game before it was time for him to sit back down because he just simply couldn't go.
At least he didn't score 0 points as the primary scorer.
He missed 9 shots, though. Like, he took plenty of shots. It wasn't like he was just frozen out. He just was a bricklayer that day. So that's going to stick in people's minds. And so the fact that he turned down that contract, he was banking on being able to say, look at what I did through a lengthy playoff run that resulted in a championship. Well, the 2 best guys got hurt, and you needed to step up, and you didn't. Because the Lakers maybe could have navigated that series against the Suns if Dennis Schroeder had played well. Because they lost competitive games in that series where, had Schroeder been better, they might have escaped, and that gives them a little more time to rest, and they would have gone up against the Nuggets, who were missing Jamal Murray and had other guys injured. They might have been able to get through to the Western Conference Finals and then get healthy against the Clippers, who were missing some key players. But Schroeder didn't get it done. So as a result, the Lakers go out in the first round. Schroeder is now a free agent. The last thing we saw him do was stink it up in the playoffs. And so the prospects of him being a valuable piece on a championship contender kind of went away because he proved he wasn't that valuable to a championship contender.
Yeah, maybe the worst thing about this whole thing is that, ultimately he went, the amount that he lost by not taking that deal is a lot more than what he was, hoping that he might gain by, succeeding through the playoffs and getting a better deal. So talking about the Lakers and their prospects for next year, obviously their prospects got a lot better because they brought in Russell Westbrook. Now, they did lose some pieces, but I don't think anything too significant. They sent Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Montrezl Harrell to the Wizards, along with a 2024 second-round pick, which is most likely worthless, a 2028 second-round pick. What? I didn't know you could trade that far in advance.
Did they throw in some Monopoly money?
And the number 22 pick from this past week's draft. All that for Russell Westbrook. So Westbrook has a new home. A few other guys have a new home. And between that trade and some other signings by the Lakers and the Wizards, respectively, Eric, what do you think about these two teams? Like, obviously, the Wizards probably doesn't move the needle too much in any particular direction. If anything, it might make them a little bit worse, at least in the short term. But I'm curious to get your thoughts more long term and what their moves mean for them as a franchise. But then also for the Lakers, do you think that this puts them in a position where they could go back and win the title after the disappointing playoffs this year?
Well, sure, but this is going to be the same issue that they had this year, was they need LeBron James and Anthony Davis to be healthy. I don't think that they've gotten better. I think they're about the same team that they were last year. I mean, they lost some dead weight. Kyle Kuzma's not that good. But Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was a key member of the rotation. He was one of the few guys that they could count on to knock down outside shots, which is something the Lakers desperately need, and Russell Westbrook doesn't fix that problem. So they went out and got guys like Carmelo Anthony, who is ancient. He's 37. They got Trevor Ariza, who was a part of the Kobe championship team in 2009. He's old. He's like 35 or 36.
He was a good three-point shooter for the Wizards for a while.
Yes, he was. But
he's 36.
He's old, man. Like, he was a key 3 and D guy, but it's hard to do D when you're old, and even hitting threes is not something that old men do forever. So he's not exactly somebody I would say is a game-changing piece. I think giving up KCP was a pretty big loss for the Lakers. Now, Can they make it up? Sure. They still have... I mean, Melo's still capable, right? Like, these guys aren't complete bums, but they did lose probably their best outside shooting option that they had given regular minutes, along with Alex Caruso, who also bounced, and he got paid. And another shot at Dennis Schroeder here. I probably shouldn't say it because it's just mean. The two guys that sat behind him on the bench got paid a lot more money than he did this offseason, between Taylor Horton Tucker, who re-signed with the Lakers on a 2-year deal. I think he's making about... He's a guy the Lakers really like. He's making about $9 million a year on his deal, and Alex Caruso signed a 4-year deal worth just shy of $40 million. So he's making more money than Dennis Schroeder, and they have the security of lengthy contracts.
Now, on the topic of LeBron and AD's health, how much rest do they have this offseason before the season starts compared to last year? Because I'm wondering if that might play a role in helping them to stay more healthy.
Well, rest is obviously going to be key. And I think that since they went out in the first round, they were done with their season in, late May? So assuming the season starts, quote-unquote, on time, whatever that means in these weird times we live in, which would be mid to late October, that's basically a full offseason, but it is the equivalent of maybe making the finals in a normal year, or at least the conference finals. So not as much time off, but the key is going to be giving them time to manage during the season. I'm going to use the infamous phrase, load management is going to be a thing here. And I don't think that means missing games. I think it means limiting their minutes, though, for sure.
When did the finals wrap up last year in the bubble? Do you remember?
In October.
Okay, so
they had a month and a half off.
Right, so definitely, even if they had made the finals this year, they would have had a lot more time off. But given that they went out in the first round, this is a lot more rest than they had last year.
And also consider the fact that it's going to be an 82-game schedule, but it's probably going to resemble a normal schedule time-wise.
Right.
There's not going to be as many back-to-backs. It's not going to be they shortened it by 10 games, but they took 2 months off the schedule. So the rate of games was much, much higher than they're used to. You're playing a lot more back-to-backs. So I think the Heat at one point played 10 games in 13 days or something like that, which is that's quite a bit. And so the Heat had to navigate that as they were trying to get into the playoffs and make a run, which obviously we know they failed and they fell short.
Didn't they have a bunch of postponements for COVID issues? Did that play a role in this baseball-like schedule that they had?
They had, some teams had that. I know the Wizards definitely had some issues with that last year, and hopefully that won't be a problem. But depending on how many players decide to get their shots and stuff like that, which we've seen can be an issue in both baseball and football. So. But the NBA seems to be a little bit more on top of the players being vaxxed. But the Lakers, I think that's really what Russell Westbrook adds to this team, though, is he can go out there and give you 35, 40 minutes a night still, even though he's 32, which helps the team continue to win games during the regular season where maybe LeBron and Anthony Davis don't have to go all out. It's in the playoffs where that becomes a little bit of an issue because Russ and LeBron aren't a great fit together. They're both ball-dominant players that don't really have much of an outside shooting game. So it creates a little bit of a spacing problem. But having Westbrook almost play the role of an innings eater out there during the regular year could keep their two best players healthy. And like I said, if those two guys are on the floor, it's not a guarantee that they're going to get through the West, but I think they should be favored, especially with Kawhi Leonard's injury and we don't really know what to expect from Golden State yet.
Before we move on to the Wizards, this week at a press conference, Russell Westbrook said that his job in LA is to make LeBron's job easier. Do you think that that's really something that he's capable of with his play style? That that's something that he can that's a role he can fill?
I don't think he optimizes well with LeBron at all, but I think that, like I said, the fact that he could control the tempo and run the plays, and LeBron can take a few plays off or get a little bit more rest, and they'll be in good shape because they have a playmaker on the floor. I think in that regard, he does make the job easier because he can provide something. It's not as good as LeBron, but it's not terrible, and that's the issue the Lakers and other LeBron-led teams have had, is that they simply didn't have a reliable second option when LeBron went to the bench of, okay, you handle the ball, you run the plays, and you get people open shots, which is why the teams that LeBron played for would always bleed points for whatever little rest he could get, whereas now they have more of an option. In fact, a big part of the reason why the Lakers looked so good early last year was because Dennis Schroeder filled that role, and he did it very well, which is probably why Dennis Schroeder thought, hey, I'm going to get $100 million because LeBron's teams were actually adding to the lead while he was on the bench for the first time in his career. And so he actually got to take some of that rest. But then Schroeder got COVID. Some other things went wrong. LeBron had to play more minutes. Anthony Davis got hurt. So that just created more pressure on LeBron, which resulted in some untimely injuries for him. So hopefully Russ can come in there and be a little bit more reliable than those guys given the circumstances last season.
So, on to the Wizards. In addition to the acquisitions they got from Los Angeles, Harrell, KCP, Kyle Kuzma. In that trade, they got the 22nd pick from the Lakers. They traded that to the Pacers for Holiday. I forget his first name, but something Holiday. Not Drew Holiday.
Somebody else?
Different Holiday.
Alrighty.
I think Aaron Holiday.
Yeah, it's Aaron Holiday.
Yeah, Aaron Holiday. And then with their 15th pick, they picked Corey Crispert. And then they also went and signed Spencer Dinwiddie. So what do you think about the Wizards' prospects for the coming season?
I think they're going to make the playoffs.
Do you?
I think they're better than they were last year, absolutely. I think that Russell Westbrook was good for the Wizards. There's no doubt he contributed a lot, and he's a big part of the reason why they were able to grab the 8th seed and get to a first-round gentleman's sweep against the Philadelphia 76ers. But I don't think Spencer Dinwiddie is necessarily an upgrade over Russell Westbrook, but I do think Spencer Dinwiddie is a good player. And I think he's capable of being a top 50 or 60 player in the NBA, which, again, Russ is better than that, but when you consider the fact that the Wizards have also added a ton of depth because, like I said, KCP is a good role player. Montrezl Harrell was 6th man of the year 2 seasons ago. Oh. I mean, he's a good player. Kyle Kuzma, moving on.
So he's all right.
But he's fine, though. Like, he's at least an NBA player. The Wizards had so many guys coming in the game last year that just were not cut out to be on an NBA floor, let alone an NBA playoff game. So I think that while Russ and Beal were great, and while they got a lot out of Daniel Gafford at the trade deadline, and Rui Hachimura has developed pretty nicely, they had no depth. And now they've got 8 guys that I feel can go out there and play professional basketball, and that's notwithstanding some of the guys coming back from injury this year.
So would my assessment be correct if I were to say that we have improved dramatically in depth, but our top-end talent has maybe declined just a little bit from last year?
It depends on where you cut off at top end. Like, our 2 best players have gotten worse because one...
What if we cut off the top end at like 4 or 5?
I would say...
You put 5 on the floor, so let's say 5.
I would say this year's Wizards starting 5 will be probably as good as last year's.
Okay, so about the same, but then we are
upgraded
much better
the bench,
in the depth.
Because, again, Dinwiddie's a slight downgrade from Russ, but then KCP is a big upgrade from whoever the hell they put out there game to game.
So will we be like the 8th seed, the 7th seed? Do you think we could get up into that 5-6 conversation?
It really depends on how the Bulls work out, because they've made a bunch of changes to their team to make themselves look a lot better. That they're not winning a championship or anything like that, but they certainly look like a viable playoff team. It depends on how the Celtics look with their upgrades, their changes, and how Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum continue to develop. I think that part of the issue was the Wizards kind of got a little bit lucky last year, given the fact that some of the teams that people thought were going to be good had down years for whatever reason. But when you consider the fact that the Pacers are going to be back in the mix, the Charlotte Hornets might be a bit better, I think it's going to be a bit more competitive as a conference, which could make the Wizards look like, oh, well, they have the same record as they did, or they're in the same seeding as they did last year, but they're actually a significantly better team. But so I would probably guess 7 or 8 seed. I think that if things go wrong and people get hurt or just inevitability of nonsense gets in the way, then they could end up missing the playoffs. But I think that they definitely have a higher ceiling this year than they did last year.
A little bit of free agency news. Luka Doncic and Stephen Curry got paid.
I mean, I think the Curry deal, they should pay him 10 times that just because...
I think we said the same thing about Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I agree with that about Patrick Mahomes, because for the same reason, having that guy on your team increases the value of your franchise by so much money that you really can't pay him enough. Like, the Golden State Warriors were irrelevant for years.
Decades.
Yeah, decades, right? And then this Curry guy shows up, they start winning, they get this brand new arena.
They get Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
You get Draymond Green.
They're the hottest ticket in town all of a sudden. So
the hottest ticket in the NBA.
yeah.
Like, when those guys are healthy, when Steph and Klay are healthy, like, there's no other team in the NBA that more people want to see.
Oh yeah, like when
There's no other team in the NBA that non-NBA fans like myself want to see.
when the Warriors came to play the Hawks one time, the traffic in Atlanta was insane. Like they said on the radio, it was like the circus was in town. Everybody knew.
Is it worse than like Falcons games?
Oh yeah, nobody goes to those.
A brand new stadium, nobody goes.
No,
They got like cheap Chick-fil-A there.
I mean,
Well,
the
not on
Chick-fil-A's
Sundays,
a regular.
though. So
Yeah, well, not on
that
Chick-fil-A on
hurts.
Sunday.
But the rest of their concessions are like actually cheap.
Yeah, I got chicken tenders and fries and water for like $7.
It's not bad.
Yeah.
You can't get that anywhere else that I've been.
Yeah,
Not
but there
around
were
here, at least.
A lot of Ravens fans at that
Maybe
game.
a minor league baseball game you could get that deal.
Oh yeah, a lot of Ravens fans at that game. A lot of empty seats. Great place to watch a football game. But yeah, Falcons fans, they.
So what do you think about those two contracts, Luka and Steph?
Well, they're interesting in the fact that both guys clearly deserved what they got. They both clearly deserved the max contracts, but the implications are different for the two of them because Steph's team is already pretty established. They've got Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andrew Wiggins, and they just acquired Andre Iguodala.
Is the prognosis that Klay's going to be healthy for the start of the season?
I don't think he'll be back at the very start of the season. He'd probably miss a month or two before he's back on the floor. They're going to be extra careful with him, especially given the fact that he's had consecutive brutal injuries.
Absolutely.
And with the fact that they've got Steph and Draymond, they can realistically hold it down for a period of time. But so Steph's situation is different because they've already got their roster pretty much filled out the way they want to, and the only real way they would improve the team realistically would be through a trade. They have no cap space to sign somebody else. But with the NBA's rules, you can always just pay your current guy a bunch more money, and the only reason for him to take a pay cut would be to save his owner money. And, well, no, nobody's going to do that. Nobody's going to say, hey, let me just put more money back in Joe Lacob's pocket if it's not actually going to result in an improved product on the court. And so I think that there's absolutely no reason for Steph not to take this deal. Luka, on the other hand, again, I'm not saying he should have turned down the Supermax, but it's an interesting position the Mavericks are in because normally when you get a young player, an up-and-coming star, he doesn't turn into a superstar in year 3. So you're not out there giving him a Supermax contract in year 3 before you've had an opportunity to build your team out, which means now it is more difficult to make the salary cap work because the idea is you pay him after you brought the guys in so you can take advantage of his bird rights and go over the cap at that point. But now you've already paid him and he's already taking up $45 million of your cap space, so that makes it a little bit harder to navigate and to add free agents. And it should be noted that the Dallas Mavericks have not had any success landing marquee free agents in the last 17, 18 years. I mean, they had Dirk Nowitzki, who was one of the prime players in the NBA for about a decade, and they could never pair him with another star. The best they gave him was Jason Kidd when Jason Kidd was like 38 years old. That was not a star at that point. That was a role player and a wily vet. That was the best that they could offer. And then in Dirk's later years, after they won that title in 2011, they never gave Dirk any support at that point. They tried their best. DeAndre Jordan was going to go there, and then he decided to go back to the Clippers, and then supposedly Mark Cuban was driving around the Dallas-Fort Worth area looking for DeAndre Jordan's address so he could go harass him at his house.
He's just riding around blindly.
According to Chris Broussard, that was the case, and Mark Cuban refuted the story, and Chris Broussard was quickly shown the door at ESPN. Okay. He's been picked up by FS1 now, so there he is. He doesn't do much reporting anymore for obvious reasons.
He's one of those hot take people now.
Yes, he's just a hot take guy that shows up on The Herd and other places. Okay. And, Undisputed and all that stuff. As we sit here and express our disdain for FS1 TV programming that I still watch sometimes.
Yes, you watch it all the time.
But anyway, another issue, though, is Luka, great player. Great young player. A lot of reason to be excited about him. might be kind of hard to play with. Like, for another star player that handles the ball, Luka he resembles a lot of what James Harden looked like in Houston, where it seemed like it just was impossible to pair another star with him, and things always were combustible with him. And Harden has changed his game a bit in Brooklyn, and
you're comparing Luka to like that James Harden.
Yes,
back
because
in the
that's
day.
what we've
not
seen.
the one that we saw with the Nets this year, who seemed to actually cohabitate pretty decently with KD and
Kyrie Irving.
And Kyrie Irving.
But the difference is, and again, we didn't actually see those three guys on the floor much either. So even that could be a little bit
games all season.
Yeah,
with all three of them on the
even
floor.
that could be a little bit of a question mark coming into this season. But we've at least seen Harden play other roles. He played a different role in Oklahoma City before he got traded to Houston. And the thing is, I'm not saying Luka can't do it. I'm just saying we haven't seen Luka have to do it yet. So it is a question mark. And the thing is, I'm not doubting his ability to adjust his game. But certain players might say, well, damn, I don't know if he's going to be willing to do that. So I might look for other options. Because they might look at Kristaps Porzingis and say, hey, this guy came there and was supposed to be the number 2. And, well, he sucks. He has no real role on that team other than stand in the corner and shoot threes. And while me personally, I blame that more on Kristaps Porzingis for being overrated and never being as good as anybody said he was, certain players might look at it and say, maybe it was Luka's fault. At which point, Luka's going to have to figure out how to make this work. And I think he can, but it's still a question mark.
What type of player fits best with Luka in a perfect world? Say you could just assign anybody, to the Dallas Mavericks. Who would that guy be?
Klay Thompson.
Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either Klay Thompson or some big man like Anthony Davis. Somebody like that. Giannis, too.
So both players signed deals worth more than $200 million. Luka's, I think, is over 5 years, and Steph's is over 4 years for that extension. Kyle Lowry went to the Miami Heat. Any thoughts on that one, Eric?
Yeah, it's a nice pickup for the Heat. I mean, this is a team that was relying on Tyler Hero, who we've talked about on this podcast, seemingly had a sophomore slump this year. Debatable why that was the case, whether it was because he was partying too much in South Beach and thought he was too cool for school, but I think that obviously Kyle Lowry is an upgrade. He's a champion. He's a multiple-time All-Star. He's probably a future Hall of Famer. He is 35 years old, so there is an age issue there. But he definitely makes the Heat better, and it puts the Heat in a better position to kind of get back to where they were in 2020 when they went to the NBA Finals. I don't know if they're going to be back at that level. I think that run was a little bit of lightning in a bottle. But I think that this definitely improves their prospects, and it's just another team that got better in the East, which is why when I talked about the Wizards a few moments ago, my concern was the East has gotten better, especially with the Hawks seemingly ready to make another run, and, well, the Knicks. I'm not that worried about the Knicks.
You alluded to the Bulls briefly earlier. They added Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan this offseason, and obviously there's still time for some other changes, but what do you think about that reload for Chicago?
I've never been a huge DeMar DeRozan guy in the sense that I don't think he's a championship player, but I do think he makes mediocre and bad teams a lot better. Like, he was really good for the Raptors and helped them sustain a lot of success, and then in the playoffs they would implode, which is why they traded him for Kawhi Leonard and then won a championship. But I think that for what he's probably going to be tapped to do with the Bulls, he's going to be effective. There were talks about him maybe signing with the Lakers, and I didn't really care for that. I was like, DeMar DeRozan with the Lakers, he doesn't play any defense, he's a ball stopper. That doesn't really fit with LeBron. But in an offense that needs a spark, like, the Bulls had Zach LaVine, and that's it. Now they've got another ball handler, another point guard in Lonzo Ball, and they've got another scoring option, DeMar DeRozan, and they traded for Nikola Vucevic at the end of last season from the Magic, who was also an all-star big. This is a pretty nice starting five at this point. I think the Bulls should be happy with the upgrades they've made. They're probably going to make the biggest leap from a non-factor in the Eastern Conference to potentially a middle-tier seed in the playoff bracket.
I mean, if teams can win NBA titles and a gold medal with JaVale McGee, I would imagine that a team can win a championship with DeMar DeRozan on their roster.
DeMar DeRozan would presumably be making more money and playing more minutes than JaVale. JaVale played about 10 minutes a game for the Golden State Warriors.
The last piece of news on the NBA, Summer League is happening. We didn't have a Summer League last year because we didn't really have a summer. between. I mean, Eric just said the bubble ended in October, and then we got started in late December. So, is there anything in particular that people should be looking for during this year's Summer League competition?
Yeah, just to check out some of the high draft picks. And, Cade Cunningham and Jalen Green went head-to-head last night. It was pretty competitive. I mean, this is mostly, like, Summer League is for NBA junkies. Like, this is for people who really want to see these young players and figure out what they can do, what their skill set is. It's not really meant for, hey, I need to be entertained, so let me sit down and watch some Summer League, unless you really want to see some high-level star. Like, I watched Summer League a lot when John Wall was drafted by the Wizards, and he played in the Summer League, and that was, 10 years ago. But the last couple summers I watched a little more just to get a feel for who these guys are. But it's not something I would say is appointment TV, especially given that baseball is going on, that those games actually count.
Oh, yeah. My dad and my sister were watching Summer League last night. He was on Big ESPN.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? Why? This is less than a scrimmage. This is less than spring training. It's not even preseason.
They don't even play by the same rules. They allow the players to commit 10 fouls.
10 fouls?
Yeah. It's a developmental league. They don't want guys fouling out. And this one guy actually did foul out one time, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, the 10 foul rule is just their...
there is a limit.
Yeah, the intent is for you not to foul out. Like, it's not, hey, we'll give you extra fouls. It's like, no, you're not supposed to foul out. How the hell did you commit 10 fouls?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Did not know that.
So let's move from the NBA to college football. Quite a bit of news to get to here. Let's start with the preseason Associated Press coaches poll, which was released.
Is it the AP poll or the coaches poll?
I guess it's the coaches vote on it, but
so it's the coaches poll.
The ones that I wrote down that was the AP poll.
Well, I guess the top 10 are identical then. But regardless, let's run through the top 10 real quick. Rapid fire: 1 Alabama, 2 Clemson, 3 Oklahoma, 4 Ohio State, 5 lowercase UGA, 6 Texas A&M, 7 Notre Dame, 8 Iowa State. Go Cyclones.
Yes, Cyclones.
9 North Carolina, and 10 Cincinnati. We've got 10 SEC teams total in the top 25. Michigan completely omitted from the top 25.
You said 10 SEC teams?
6 SEC teams in the top 25.
You said 10, right?
Yes, I heard 10 as well.
Yeah.
6 SEC teams are in the top 25. Michigan omitted completely. And on Georgia Tech's schedule, Evan, you got 4 of the top 10. Clemson, UGA, North Carolina, and Notre Dame.
Yes.
So good luck with that.
The only team that we don't, of those 4 that we don't play every year is Notre Dame. But yeah, the other 3 are on the schedule all the time.
Pretty impressive that North Carolina's in the top 10. I feel like I don't really see that very much.
They've invested a lot of money in their program.
I know that they and Duke have both gotten better in football over the past 5 or so years, but still, like, I haven't really seen them take either of them take that step up into the top teams, at least at a point where you would say in the preseason that this team could be top 10. So good for North Carolina.
In the ACC Coastal Division, it's been a revolving door as to who gets to get annihilated by Clemson or Florida State in the conference championship game. I think all 7 teams have played in the last 8 conference championships.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it's Georgia Tech's turn. It's our turn now. When do we get to go?
Well, I remember Georgia Tech played against Florida State in 2014.
Yes, I remember because I was there.
Yeah, and I watched on TV and I was like, wow, Florida State was really struggling with the triple option for about a half, and then they started to figure it out and they eventually got it done.
We covered though.
Yes, you did, because I remember for a little while I thought Jameis and the boys were going to lose. I legitimately thought Georgia Tech was going to pull it out, but
yeah, it was close.
So, any thoughts on the on that preseason poll?
No, but
Not
I mean,
really.
the top 5 or 6 or 7 or so, I could have told you, 3 years ago. Like all these,
these
it's
are the
always
same teams.
And
Pretty much.
Yeah, and the college football playoff expanding, and Oklahoma and Texas moving to SEC,
And they're expanding to 8 teams, right?
Expanded to 12.
Oh, 12.
Yeah.
12 teams. Oh,
All these changes in college football, everybody's freaking out, but the good teams are still good, and the bad teams are still bad. We changed all this other stuff, but in terms of the outcomes on the field, none of that is any different. the tide's still rolling at number 1.
It's going to be interesting to see how that college football playoff expansion, changes things for some of these teams because, potentially you could have a couple of teams who have to play 3 additional games, in addition to their schedules that, typically are already around, 13 games for most teams?
If you go to
between
your
12 and 14?
conference championship, that's the 13th game.
Right.
So 3 more on top of that. But,
you figure if you're in the college football playoff, you're most likely playing in your conference championship game. Not definitely. There'll be a few teams in there who don't, but most of them will have played in their conference championship.
Yeah. I mean, let's not pretend that any of the people making these decisions actually care about what happens to the players, right? Like, it's all about the money. So if the college football playoff is really, really successful with 3 games every year, let's just go to 11 games a year.
Yeah, it's 8 more prime time.
Now, most likely,
standalone games.
Most likely, nobody's going to play more than 2 additional games because it's the championship game is probably going to be between 2 of the top 4 teams.
Yeah,
most likely. Like, that's just how college football works. There's not much parity there.
Yeah,
but potentially you could have that additional game for a team. Bobby Bowden, legendary Florida State coach. He passed away this past week. I don't really know a whole lot about the guy, but I know both of you guys do.
Yeah, you don't even know how to pronounce his name, apparently.
Yeah.
Bowden?
Yeah.
Bowden?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, man. Yeah, he was a longtime Florida State head coach. He had the record for wins before Joe Paterno passed him, and then Joe Paterno lost it on account of Joe Paterno's issues at Penn State, and then people sued, so Joe Paterno's back on top, and he got his wins reinstated. Yeah, that happened.
Why did people sue? That doesn't mean anything.
I didn't know that he got... A, how did they sue? And B, I didn't know that he got them reinstated.
Yes, he did. He got... Joe Paterno is the current wins leader all time because his vacated wins from those specific seasons where he supposedly knew what was going on were reinstated.
Just to tell you how much that record matters, but it did matter when Bobby Bowden had the record.
Yeah, Bobby Bowden's record of success is pretty unparalleled. I mean, his teams for 14 straight years finished in the top 5 in the AP poll. And I think that before that, Florida State had never finished in the top 20, which back then it was only 20 teams ranked before they expanded to 25. So his impact was pretty clear. He was a big part of the reason why Florida became a hot spot for football, especially at the college level between them and Miami. And he was one of the first guys that straight up said, I'm going to go recruit black players. And it's not going to be a case of some black players. It was, no, I'm going to build my entire football operation using the best players, which oftentimes are black players. And that was a huge deal. I mean, people sometimes don't realize that Florida State back in those days was basically the same thing that Miami was, except Miami seemed to always win every game against them by a field goal. Or a missed field goal in Florida State's case. So people would always root for the underdogs, the plucky Bobby Bowden against Jimmy Johnson or whoever else, and they would lose. And people would realize, like, you're rooting for a team that, because everybody hated Miami.
Yeah.
Like, Miami were the villains of college football, but Florida State was the same thing. It's kind of like people that root against the Yankees, so they pull for the Red Sox. It's like, yeah, the Red Sox are just the less successful version of the Yankees.
Right.
Like, they're the same thing. Like, you shouldn't like them either.
Yeah. Bobby Bowden's career was, I mean, really unparalleled. So much success. I know a lot of Florida State fans that could, I guess, tell more about him specifically, but I think the way he left Florida State was kind of ugly, but he'll certainly be missed.
Obviously very sad to hear about his death, but he was getting up there in years.
Yeah, he was 91.
A little bit more tragically, we got some news this week of a 19-year-old freshman at Virginia Union University, Quandarius Wilburn, who died after collapsing during conditioning session at his team's football practice this week. Not a lot of details are available yet. On the surface, sounds kind of similar to the story we covered on our very first episode here on the Sports Ballers back in 2018 with the University of Maryland. but definitely prayers for Quandarius Wilburn's family. Hopefully it was not a case of negligence on the part of the coaching staff. But you always hate to hear these sorts of stories about any young player dying during football practice. But this is the time of year that you inevitably hear a couple of those stories from around the country, whether on the college or the high school level. And not to go off on a tangent, and I won't, but with current climate change and everything, it's only going to get worse every year at this point. Moving on to one last topic on the college football scene. Those who listen to our podcast on a regular basis and have heard some of our college football discussion in the past know that we are not big fans of Dabo Swinney on this show. No. And this week, he can extra suck it because their starting quarterback has gotten his second sponsorship deal of the offseason. He already signed a deal with Bojangles, and now he's added Dr. Pepper to the mix.
Bojangles. It's such a southern thing. I love it. It's
absolutely
so perfect.
I mean,
it's delicious.
It's fantastic.
It is delicious, and it's Clemson, so it is in the South, so it works.
Yes, it does.
So that's two pretty major sponsorships for. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but DJ Ugalele.
DJ Uiagalelei.
Uiagalelei. There's no N in his name. How is it Uiagalelei?
Like Tua Tagovailoa.
That's true. There's no N in Tagovailoa either. That's true.
Point.
All right, so DJ Uiagalelei.
You said ukulele. That's not.
Did I?
Yes.
You said
DJ Uiagalelei.
Okay, we get it. The point is, call him.
I don't know that Corey gets it.
I'm gonna get it. I will get it eventually.
I mean, he made
Good
sure he
Lord.
knew how to say Homana Wanui or whatever from from the
I want to
NFL,
know
so.
how to pronounce these names. I want to pronounce them correctly. I'm not trying to butcher these players' names. Like they deserve to have their names pronounced correctly, but some of them are difficult. So I apologize. But anyway, that's now a second sponsorship deal since the recent ruling that college football players can profit off of their likeness and get sponsorship deals. So good for him, and his head coach can, as I said, suck it. Before we move on to more professional sports, one last bit of news. This isn't specific to any particular sport, but Valparaiso University changed their nickname from the Crusaders to the Beacons. Their school motto is "In Thy Light We See Light." They're a Lutheran university, I believe. So it's a fine name for them. I find it interesting the reason that they did it, and the larger discussion on it. So the reason they changed them to Crusaders is because certain groups, including the Ku Klux Klan, have basically been they've been making a lot of references in recent months to the Crusades. Speaking specifically of the Crusades between the Catholic Church and the Muslims, hundreds of years ago. But because of that, Valparaiso decided to change their name. And this is a situation where there's nothing offensive about Crusaders, I don't think. I mean, you could make the argument that the Crusades were not, the Catholic Church tries to, whitewash that history or whatever. But, and you'd be right in saying that. It'd be perfectly fair to make that argument. But generally speaking, the Crusades are not something that really entered, current discussions on, we should cancel references to the Crusades, or we should make sure that we're teaching the Crusades in the proper light. Not that there hasn't been any discussion, but that hasn't been a big thing within the court of public opinion in recent years. So for them to take the initiative and do this, I think that it's it's a good move on Valparaiso's part. It also, I think, I find it fascinating within the conversation of the Washington football team changing their name and supposedly having a permanent new name in February of next year. The Cleveland Indians changing their name and officially announced that they're going to be the Guardians moving forward after this year. Those are names that there actually is offense that people take to them. Whether they are intentionally offensive or not, there are ways that people are offended by them. And in the same way, right now, talking about the Crusades, if a white supremacist group is bogarting that term, you probably want to distance yourself from it. And Valparaiso has done that really before anybody started making a big fuss about it, at least on the national stage. I hadn't heard anything about this until this past week. So just an interesting tidbit. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but if not, we can move on. And so we will. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit of NFL. We had the Hall of Fame inductions this past weekend. Really exciting. We had the 2020 Centennial class go in because we had to postpone from last year after everything that was going on with COVID, as well as the 2021 class. So I believe, was it Friday or Saturday was the 2020 class, and that was
I think it was Saturday.
I think it was Saturday. It was a big day, a lot of names. I think it was like 12 of them total who went in. Some of the big names included Edgerrin James, Isaac Bruce, Troy Polamalu, Jimmy Johnson, Bill Cowher, and former Commissioner Paul Tagliabue. All of them gave excellent speeches. There were a handful of others who went in that day, which was, it was really good. I got a chance to watch through all those speeches yesterday, and Edgerrin James, his speech was just wow. I mean, one of those that you just won't forget. Paul Tagliabue, I thought, did a pretty good job sort of piggybacking off of Edgerrin James too. He made a lot of references to Edge's speech during his own speech, which I thought was pretty cool for a former commissioner to kind of take the reins from a player and follow his lead. I thought that was really interesting. Troy Polamalu was great. Jimmy Johnson was really cool. He was just diverting all the praise onto his players and his coaches. Basically, none of this was me. Like, I didn't win those games in Miami. I didn't win the games for the Cowboys. Certainly not for the Dolphins, but because they didn't win a lot of games. But put a lot of the praise onto his coaches and his players, and I thought that was really cool. Just very humble. And then Bill Cowher gave a good speech at the end. And then the 2021 class, I also got to watch those yesterday. Tom Flores, Alan Faneca, Bill Dunn, they all went in, and those were good speeches. But my favorites were the ones from players that I grew up watching, like Peyton Manning, obviously, John Lynch, Charles Woodson, Calvin Johnson, and then Drew Pearson. This was really entertaining. He was just so excited to finally be in the Hall of Fame. Definitely overdue, more than deserving for Drew Pearson to be there. But it was so cool to see his excitement. But Calvin Johnson, the third youngest player ever to be inducted in the Hall of Fame, younger than Barry Sanders was when he went in.
Was he younger than LaDainian Tomlinson?
He's younger than LaDainian Tomlinson.
Really?
So it was Gale Sayers and I believe Jim Brown. Brown. Those were the two who went in younger than him. But both of them, I think, were 35. He's just an older 35. But Sam Martin, who is in our fantasy baseball league, he sent me a meme today, which I didn't even think about this, but wow. Calvin Johnson was drafted, played, retired, and inducted into the Hall of Fame all between Tom Brady's 7th and 22nd seasons.
I mean, Calvin Johnson had his whole college career while Tom Brady was still playing. Like his freshman year at Georgia Tech was Brady's third Super Bowl.
Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah.
And this dude is a Hall of Famer. Well-deserved, too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely,
Just amazing player.
Too bad the Lions forced him into retirement just like Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So, it's just so funny. Like, he's 35 years old. If he wanted to,
he could play now.
He could come back and play and have, 3 or 4 fairly high-level seasons, I would think. I mean, I know he's 35 and, typically wide receivers age a little faster, but without the wear and tear of the past 5 or 7 years or whatever it's been on his body, he could come back and play for a few more years.
Like Randy Moss when he was on the 49ers.
Yeah, he took a year off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
he was decently productive for the 49ers too.
And I don't think that any player has ever come back after being inducted to the Hall of Fame and played again. I know it's happened with.
Allowed to?
Yeah.
I don't see why you wouldn't be allowed to.
I don't see why there would be a rule that you couldn't do that. I mean, Joe Gibbs came back and coached after he'd been inducted in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but coaching is different.
I don't see why it would be against the rules. It just doesn't make any sense to take 5 years off of football. Like, you'd be coming back in your mid to late 30s.
Right.
Which most dudes don't want to do after already spending a decade plus in the NFL.
Not predicting a comeback, not even like, man, Calvin Johnson needs to come. Just,
Clearly he doesn't, because he got into the Hall of Fame with his 9 seasons
that would be pretty
before.
impressive. So, any thoughts on the Hall of Fame class? Any particular speeches that stood out to you guys?
I've only seen Peyton Manning's speech. Haven't watched the other ones.
Well, definitely check out the other ones on the list that I put on the in the show notes, because those were
driving all day Saturday.
Very, very well worth the watch. Peyton Manning's was really entertaining. He's just so funny. I enjoyed his quip about by the time that Tom Brady enters the Hall of Fame, he'll only have time to post his acceptance speech on Instagram, because they're just shortening the speech allotment time every year, it seems like.
Oh, well, I mean, Ray Lewis just wrapped up his speech from 2018.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, of all the guys that you'd want to hear from for like more than just 6 minutes, I know Peyton kind of went over and they let him.
A few of them did go a little bit over, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. But given the fact that it's Peyton Manning, like, that's the guy you want to hear from, and then Ray Lewis, who just everything he says is always a sermon, kind of ruined it for everybody by taking an hour to just go on whatever Ray was going on about.
It was a little less than an hour.
Yeah, it was like 35
a little
minutes. It was long though, man. I was watching that at the bar. I was like, "Damn, Ray's still going." I wasn't that surprised, but I was just like, "Man, he's on one tonight, man. He's taking his moment, and you gotta give him credit for it. But damn, man, kind of ruined it for everybody else now." So, but yeah, I thought Peyton Manning's speech was great. I was absolutely tuning in to see that. There's a lot of talk about, damn, this guy sounds like he should be commissioner. I'm like, I think Peyton Manning's career deserves better than being the commissioner of the NFL. The commissioner is never a liked dude. He's a guy that represents the owners and their interests. I mean, imagine Peyton Manning, who used to be at the forefront of the Players Association when he was a player, now stepping across the picket line and going and basically stumping for the owners. It would be impossible for him to do that and maintain any type of likability that he's built for so long. And I think that's important to Peyton. I think he'd be awesome as commissioner. I think he'd do a really good job, but I think that part of his brand is being that universally liked,
I think if there's anybody who could, be in that sort of a role and still maintain some integrity toward the players, it probably would be him. But it doesn't mean that he can do it, because it might just be something that nobody's capable of doing.
I just don't think that we're talking about 32 billionaires. Billionaires don't get to be billionaires by being good guys. No. Like, let's be real. Like, there might be an occasional guy that you say, okay, that guy's good. These dudes are all shrewd. They're all scheming. They've all got something up their sleeves. And Peyton, or the commissioner, his job is to basically listen to them and represent their interests. So at some point, the job description is you have to represent the interests of a bunch of scheming billionaires, which is never going to look good for you.
I mean, some of them are like the children of the business people that bought the team. Like, Jim Irsay's just Bob Irsay's son.
Yeah, but Jim
I
Irsay is not the best example, because he's not a good guy.
Of a benevolent
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, right? I shouldn't say he's not a good guy. There's plenty of people who would vouch for his character to some extent, but he also,
he's had his issues.
He's had DUIs
he's had
and
plenty
other
of issues,
so.
right? But like, he didn't build himself up to be a rich person. He was just born into being the son of the Colts owner.
Well, given that some people like Chet Hanks exist, you might think
Who is that?
He's Tom Hanks' other son, who's just a nut.
Chet.
Yeah, but again, not every Hanks son is terrible. Colin Hanks seems perfectly grounded and fine.
Yeah, but still, the point is,
it's
a mixed
you
bag.
You also have some people like Chet Hanks.
You could easily have somebody turn out to be Tony Stark, or you could have him turn out to be Billy Madison. Like,
you really were driving all day if you missed Mike Freeman's retweet of the Chet Hanks rant.
God.
It was
Forgive
wild.
me for looking at the road instead of my phone.
I'm not criticizing him. So Chet Hanks is one of Tom Hanks' sons, and he basically did this rant where he got on, he's talking about vaccines, and he starts off basically like touting how important it is to get vaccinated and everything, sounding like a completely normal, reasonable person, very calm, collected. His thoughts are very, well thought out, and then all of a sudden he goes psych, and he goes into this like weird tangent. He's like completely anti-vax, but he's acting like a complete psychopath. like, is that really the best way to convince me that it's not a good idea to get vaccinated? To sound calm and collected and intelligent when you're talking about getting vaccinated, and then sounding like you belong in an insane asylum.
Oh, right.
When you start going off the rails about how it's my body, my choice, I shouldn't get... What?
He's making it sound like he knew that everybody else knew that the first half was the crazy part. When it's obvious the second half is the crazy part.
Yeah, like, come on. So that happened. Moving on. Hard Knocks debuted last night. The first episode of this season of Hard Knocks, featuring the Dallas Cowboys training camp. And Dak and Zeke stole the show.
Did Zeke hold on to the football? How about that?
He did.
Okay.
No, so we got to see this scar from Dak Prescott on his ankle and everything.
Oh,
they showed the replay more times than I cared to watch of him getting injured. They also showed a replay of him banging his foot into the ground trying to get it back into its socket, which I didn't even know that he did that at the time. Oh my god, I was cringing so hard.
I read about him saying that when he suffered the injury that he thought it might have just been like a dislocation, so he was just trying to fix it.
Yeah, he took his leg and like whacked it into the ground. It's like, no, don't do that.
That doesn't help.
Oh.
Yeah, then he realized, that's not going to fix my shattered ankle. Maybe I should wait for the medic to show up.
He looked good early. We all know that he's dealing with an upper body strain right now in his shoulder. That he's going to be out for a little bit of time, kind of nursing that. But so far, the ankle seems pretty good. But it was also really funny because both of them, Dak and Zeke, they had birthdays during the first week of training camp, a few days apart. And so they were exchanging gifts. And we got to watch Ezekiel Elliott struggle to figure out how to wrap a gift. Wow. That was really entertaining. He said he had never wrapped a gift before.
It's like, I'm not. You gotta learn.
Yeah, I don't want to give him too much crap, but my goodness, dude, like, it's not that difficult to wrap a gift.
It's never done it before. It's hard. The first time I had to wrap presents, it was tough.
So so he got Dak a bag with wheels on it to take with his stuff to the airport. It's a matching set, so Zeke has one too. I thought that was adorable.
Eric disagrees.
And Zeke is also no longer rocking the keg gut under, with his. He's got a hoodie underneath his rolled up pads now. So.
Oh, I didn't think he was fat. I thought like.
No, I wasn't really fat, but he did. His abs were not defined. He didn't have a six pack.
Oh,
it was
he
a
used
keg.
to. When he was drafted, he wore that.
That's true.
Tummy tickler. And he definitely had abs on that thing, but it was an interesting choice.
I was gonna say that some guys have abs that are so defined and worked out that like it makes them look fat because the muscles are just so big.
It's like Aaron Donald's abs. If you've seen, when he's not rocking the shirt and pads and stuff, he's like, he just looks like a mountain of a human.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's move on to some training camp news. The Saints are in a little bit of trouble at cornerback after they released Janoris Jenkins this past offseason. And then Patrick Robinson, out of the blue, surprising even Sean
Payton?
Yeah, thank you, Sean Payton. Suddenly decided to retire this week. So
Joe Judge is obviously coaching the Saints now. That's why.
No, Joe Judge only runs offensive linemen out of 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, so the Saints secondary is looking like it's going to be a little rough this year. They still have Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Williams, and I think they still have C.J. Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah.
So if he wants to get somebody tossed out of a game, that's nice.
That's the guy who punched the Bears player for no reason.
Well, no, he took his mouthpiece, and then the Bears player punched him for that reason. And then Javon Wims got kicked out of the game.
Yeah.
Also, how do you take someone's mouthpiece?
It's like hanging, like it's one of those things where it's attached to the
hanging
helmet.
to the
face.
So
it was in his mouth, but there's still something you could snag, and he pulled it out. And
well, he didn't have it in his mouth at the time.
Yeah, so
it was like hanging off his helmet.
So he just snatched it and threw it on the turf, and you could see it. And Aikman on the broadcast even pointed it out. And he said somebody's mouthpiece is sitting there on the turf. And then, but there was like a whole bunch of action that happened because I think that Johnson snatched it on like a third down, and so the Bears had to come out and punt. And then so it took like 20 minutes of real time before Javon Wims could get his payback on C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So it just seemed like he was wailing on him for no reason. But you could see him try to grab CJ's mouthpiece.
I think John Boy was the one who did the breakdown of it.
Yeah, I saw a couple of breakdowns of it, and it was something that built up before because people were like, why is Javon Wims randomly swinging on the Saints' nickel corner? Like, that doesn't make any sense. But,
yeah, that was funny. But anyway, so we'll see what happens there. But, the Saints might get torched this season, which all the more reason for our boy Jameis Winston to just start airing it out all season long.
Gonna have a throwback to 2014 when the Saints would give up 45 points every week.
Or 2019 when he went 30 for 30.
Yes.
Zach Wilson apparently has not looked very good in training camp so far. So what do we make of that?
Nothing.
I mean, yeah, nothing. He's a rookie. He's going to have his struggles. I just thought it was silly that Robert Saleh said, well, some guy that just got enshrined in the Hall of Fame had a tough rookie year. I'm like, try not to compare your new quarterback to Peyton Manning, especially when he sucks right now. Like, maybe don't put that kind of pressure on him. Like, it's also not really, it doesn't make any sense because Peyton Manning played football 25 years ago as a rookie. Yeah. Like, that was eons ago at this point. And also, Peyton threw all those picks, but he still showed signs that he was going to be really good, even as a rookie when he was struggling. Like, that was the only thing he did wrong was throw picks, because if you actually looked it up, his DVOA was positive despite the fact that he threw 28 interceptions. And so he...
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that.
Like, it wasn't like typical Peyton Manning by any means, but it was north of average despite a gajillion turnovers. So the evidence was there that Peyton Manning was still going to be a special player. If Zach Wilson goes out there and stinks it up his rookie year, it's not going to mean much because rookies suck sometimes and they get better, but I wouldn't sit there and say, well, Peyton Manning did it. I'm like, well, maybe you should use a more recent example that's relevant, like, say, Josh Allen, who was terrible as a rookie, but is now getting paid, which I don't think we put on our show notes, but, he got paid, and he deserved it because he was terrific last year.
Yep. Speaking of recently drafted players who have not been looking that great in camp, Jamar Chase apparently has been awful in Bengals camp. Truly awful.
Truly awful.
That's what I'm hearing. Joe Burrow has also been really inconsistent in his apparent comfort level with moving around.
Well, he got his legs snapped in half, so that makes sense.
You know, that itself is not something to be too concerned about yet. No. He'll develop that comfort again, I'm sure.
Yeah, they say that it usually takes a full season after an injury like that to get back. Like Tom Brady even had, like when he was still really good, obviously the year he came off his ACL, but it was the next year that he got back to like all-time MVP form.
But it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jamar Chase. I mean, it's a guy who opted out last year because of COVID, and so we didn't get to see him play, and he's a little bit undersized as a receiver. So it'll be interesting to see how things turn out there. Dwayne Brown.
He was nasty at LSU, though.
Oh yeah, he was the best receiver on that team.
That had Justin Jefferson on it. Yeah.
Dwayne Brown is holding out to try and get a new contract with the Seahawks. Your guys' thoughts on that?
I mean, you don't smash your head into a wall over and over for less money than you think you should get. So, the Seahawks need to pay up.
Right. Plus, considering the whole issue that Russell Wilson had with the team about the offensive line sucking, this is the one guy that was actually good on it. Yeah. You might want to make sure he stays in the building. Just saying.
Yeah. Speaking of holdouts, another guy that we didn't have that on the show notes, but who is staging a hold-in, so to speak. He's not participating in workouts, but he is at practice. T.J. Watt is not working out right now with the Steelers. He's holding out for a new deal as well.
Was he tagged this year? Because I thought he was coming into the season. He was a free agent.
I don't remember, honestly. I just saw the
it would make sense if he was a free agent and they tagged him because he's obviously great. Like, that would be the guy to tag if you're concerned you're not going to be able to lock him up.
Well, anyway, yeah. While you're looking it up, I mean, the same point stands, right? You're not going to keep smashing your head into a wall.
I don't
for
see
less
anything
money
here
than
about a franchise tag, but
you
maybe they did.
Yeah, I'm not going to be an all-pro linebacker for peanuts.
I'm pretty sure he had like another year on his deal though, so he wouldn't be franchise tagged if that was the case. But anyway,
I thought for some reason I thought he was a free agent.
We had some interesting quarterback news from this past week regarding COVID specifically. Lamar Jackson is still researching COVID vaccines.
Yes.
He was
just like OJ's still looking for the real killer, right?
So Jackson tested positive for COVID this past week. It's the second time now that he's had the coronavirus.
He had symptoms again too.
Yeah, and he had symptoms again. He was interviewed a few days ago and was asked during the interview if he would get the vaccine, and he did not completely shut down the idea. He didn't say yes, but he also didn't say no, which is part of the reason why he's not getting quite as much attention on the national stage as Kirk Cousins.
Well, Kirk Cousins put 4 feet in his mouth at the same time.
Oh my goodness, Kirk Cousins. So we already knew, last year he had an interview with Kyle Brandt of Good Morning Football where he said there's no way he's going to get the vaccine. He basically kind of crapped on the idea of masks and everything as well. But in fact, I think at one point he was asked on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, there's no way that I'll wear a mask, and 10, I'm not leaving my house for the next 10 months. He was like, well, I don't really want to say anything too bad about masks because I know, it'll get me in trouble, but I'd be at like a 0.00001, which is, let me check my math, less than 1. That's not even on the scale. Yeah. So,
Kirk Cousins, not a math guy. This past week,
I think we actually did we bring this up on last week's podcast on Monday? Where
probably
I think it had already happened, where their quarterback room was a little bit of a mess because one of their players tested positive. He was a close contact and so was being held out of practice, and they were down to 1 quarterback who was not a close contact and so could practice. And I believe he was also the only quarterback who had been vaccinated. But in the aftermath of that, as Evans said, he put 4 feet in his mouth all at once. Kirk Cousins basically said that he'll surround himself with plexiglass this season if he needs to. He'll do everything he needs to avoid getting COVID, except get the vaccine.
See, the thing is, I as dumb as it sounds, because it really is really stupid, at least he's making some effort to not get people sick, whereas I don't feel like Lamar's doing that. Lamar just seems like he's like, just kind of giving dismissive answers about, I gotta talk to the doctors. I'm like, the doctors have already told you many times over to get the damn shot. So that's clearly not the issue. And Lamar doesn't seem to be making a similar effort to quote unquote put himself in plexiglass. So,
but
despite Kirk's silliness and him being Kirk, which is just.
But is Kirk Cousins actually making an effort not to get other people sick, or is he just? Is this all smoke and mirrors? Is he just saying this stuff? Because the bottom line is he wasn't surrounded by plexiglass in the quarterback room. Like, if he had been taking the measures to make sure that if he gets sick, if he gets the coronavirus, he won't spread it to anybody, he wouldn't have been a close contact to somebody who got it.
Well, he also said this after he
returned from the list.
I get that, but this is not the NFL's first rodeo dealing with protocols for COVID-19, and clearly he has not been fully respecting those protocols to this point.
I mean, the bottom line is you need to get vaccinated, and all the other foolishness about I need to talk to the doctors, and I'll surround myself in plexiglass, and we'll space out really super far, and we'll all drive separately. None of that matters. Just get the shot and move on. I don't understand what the problem is. You are intentionally burying your head in the sand, or you're just an idiot, and I can't help you. So, just get the vaccine. It's not hard. It's free. It costs $0. Just go to Walmart. It's right there.
One last piece of news out of training camp for the Baltimore Ravens, Evans team. Former Minnesota
Wide receiver.
Yeah, wide receiver. Minnesota University wide receiver. Rashad Bateman. He was the Ravens' first round draft pick this year. They finally went and got a wide receiver early in the draft. He went down with a soft tissue issue, and John Harbaugh expects that the time he'll miss is on the order of weeks and not months. Mm-hmm. But how many weeks? We don't know.
Yeah. So I they didn't even say what the issue is, but it sounded like a hamstring or a quad or something like that.
Yeah.
But, this isn't good news, and this is why I hate training camp, because nothing good ever happens in training camp.
Yeah, there's never a good story to come out of training camp. It's always so-and-so got hurt, or this guy sucks.
Yeah.
Or this guy refused to get vaccinated, or this guy got sick. Mm-hmm. It's never something like, oh, wow, we're going to win the Super Bowl in July. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, you can't win the Super Bowl in July, but you can lose it.
Yes, you can.
And when you hear stories that are good out of training camp, like Zach Moss apparently crushing it in Bills camp,
what?
Right, exactly. Who cares about those good news? Because it doesn't
Everybody
matter
should be crushing it.
Until they're on the field.
Right. All the guys, so-and-so's in the best shape of his life. Well, yeah, he should be. This is the NFL. It's your job.
Professional football, kind of hard not to be in the best shape of your life if you want to actually make the team.
Yeah, unless you're 36 years old and you're starting to decline a little bit, there's no
You
excuse
still shouldn't be in the best shape of your life. Or you should be, right?
Maybe.
If you're Tom Brady,
I
you need
could
to be in
see
the
where
best
you
shape of
like
your life.
decline a little bit from the previous year, but you should be in better shape than you were at the end of last year.
Decline a little bit, right? You decline a little bit, you need to go sit down.
All right, so let's move on to Major League Baseball. Last sport on
Speaking of declining.
Yes.
on our sheet. So it's my week hosting, so I'll start with my Yankees. We have won 11 of our last 15 games. We are moving on up, at least within the rankings of our division, not so much toward the leader of the division because the Tampa Bay Rays have been on fire. But we've moved up to third place in the AL East. We're half a game ahead of Toronto. We're now just 2 games back of Boston because they've fallen apart. They're 2-8 in their last 10 games. And because of that, we're just 2 games out of the wild card. So we're in that conversation right now. We've been playing pretty well over this last stretch. We've, I believe, tomorrow's game, which will be at the Field of Dreams. Tomorrow is that game in Iowa against the White Sox. That will conclude 17 straight days of games for the Yankees. Friday will be our first day off in a while. Big game there. We'll play a game tomorrow in Iowa against the White Sox, and then we'll finish out that series on Saturday and Sunday. This past week, Monday, the Yankees were playing against the Royals, and that was quite the entertaining game. The Yankees blew 4 saves and won. It is the first game in Major League Baseball history, according to the Elias Sports Bureau, in which both teams scored in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th innings. Mm-hmm. It's impressive. It's a lot of blown saves between the two teams.
Well, the Royals were never ahead. They were
that's true. They
catching
caught up and
then
tied.
Losing,
yeah.
then letting the Yankees get ahead and then tying the game up.
So that's where the Yankees are right now. On the injury front, Gleyber Torres is on the 10-day IL with a thumb strain. Gio Urshela and Aroldis Chapman should be back by our next show, hopefully. And, of course, we got some COVID issues with the team again. This time it's Anthony Rizzo, Gary Sanchez, Jordan Montgomery, and Garrett Cole, who are all out with positive COVID tests.
So the unvaccinated Anthony Rizzo caught COVID? I'm shocked.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling that could happen. It's a highly contagious disease that you have no defense against. And you're traveling all the time.
Who knows? It's a mystery.
Yeah.
So, how about your guys' Orioles?
Oh, jeez. So, I guess we'll start with on the field, because that's brief. The Orioles' last win was also the same day as their last show, August 2nd. So they won that game, and then they lost all 6 games since then. The Tampa Bay Rays came to Baltimore and just beat the Orioles to a pulp. In all 3 games, it was like 16-3, 12-3, and 9-5 or something like that. It wasn't close. And the Rays are good and the Orioles are not. So that's not entirely unexpected.
You were at Sunday's game.
I was at Sunday's game and had a great time. I couldn't help but just be smiling the whole time. I was so glad to be there. The weather was beautiful. It was a little hot, but that's summertime for you.
It had been a while since you'd been at Camden.
I hadn't been to an Orioles home game since 2017. I think that was
a long drought for you.
Yes, I think that was.
Was that Zach Britton bobblehead game?
Yes, that was Zach Britton bobblehead game. So where
were your guys' seats this week?
We were sitting slightly to the outfield side of the Orioles dugout, so like one section up in the lower level. Cedric Mullins hit a leadoff home run on the first pitch that the Rays pitcher threw. Michael Wacha started for them. The Orioles were hitting him around pretty good.
He was with the Cardinals?
Yeah,
I knew I recognized that name.
Yeah. But
Waka
then
Waka?
the Orioles had the lead, and then the Orioles bullpen came in, and the Orioles no longer had the lead, and that was that. So let's see. So
you guys are in the middle of the home set against
Yes.
Detroit. You'll be playing in Boston this weekend, and then you got 4 in the Trop against the Rays next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last thing they need is more of the Rays.
Right. Yeah. So the Rays will
Honestly,
be
the
even
Yankees
further
need
in
is more
first
of
place.
The Rays playing the Orioles.
Right.
Well, the Rays were knocking the Red Sox around too, man. They're beating everybody.
Yeah. I remember I made a joke when I said the Orioles were going to play the Yankees and the Rays for 6 games. That hopefully the Orioles win one of those, and they did win one of those. So
Against the Yankees.
I guess the wrong team.
Yeah, the first game. We got Tampa Bay next week. In terms of performance on the field, pretty much everybody has sucked. Cedric Mullins had a good week, but when your team is bad, that means you have a lot of bad players. So it is what it is. So Orioles Twitter yesterday had a meltdown, as it usually does, over little stuff. So we have one here. It's hate on the O's week in the national media. So I responded with, yeah, the Orioles suck. We notice. So we got a tweet from Buster Olney yesterday. Quote, the Orioles on pace to lose 106 games this season, and in their previous 2 full seasons, they lost 115 and 108 in 2018 and 19. This is unprecedented in AL history. When the Players Union cites non-competitive behavior, the Orioles could be Exhibit A. It's just wrong. End quote. So, speaking of stuff, so there's a lot of stuff in here that's just wrong. Unprecedented in AL history, for example, the Philadelphia Athletics would like a word. They never won anything. Like, Connie Mack was their manager and team owner. He's got the most wins in MLB history, with like 3,000 and something. But he also has over 4,000 losses. All they did was lose up there before they moved to Kansas City. They had some good years, but he's taking such a small sample size with the last 3 seasons with the Orioles being bad and calling it unprecedented. And like the Astros have had unprecedented stretches of terribleness before they got good. I don't know what makes them so likable all of a sudden. And, Eric's Mariners, for example, haven't been to playoffs in 20 years. The Kansas City Royals went 29 years without making the playoffs between their 3 World Series runs. So, this is just absurd. Someone replied to Buster Olney that he shouldn't hate the player, hate the game, which Buster Olney misconstrued as he asked which players is he hating, and that's not the point, right? Like there's
the player is the Orioles.
Yeah.
The game is suck for a few years to try and get better.
Yeah, Major League Baseball. That's the game.
Yeah, the financial construct of Major League Baseball has some issues, and that's why some teams have to completely blow it up and, start from scratch to get a good team, whereas others can just grab this guy, and success.
Yeah. If you don't want teams to go this route to try and get better, then disincentivize teams from doing that. Like, change the rules in some way. Like, the NBA has sort of done that by changing the odds of the lottery picks and everything so that, teams don't feel like, if we suck and lose all of our games, then we're going to be guaranteed to have a top 3 pick. Well, no, that's not the case anymore.
Well,
the NBA
I don't
also
think
institutes a salary cap,
Yeah,
which maintains some level of
Salary floor, you mean?
the NBA. No, they have a salary cap.
I mean, Major League Baseball sort of has that.
No, they don't.
It's not a hard cap, but they still have the luxury tax. You have to
It's
pay
not
additional.
a cap. A cap means at some point you are not allowed to do something.
Well, okay, but I don't follow the point that you're making by bringing the salary cap up with this. Like, what does that have to do with the sucking for a few years in order to...
It has to do with striking a competitive balance so that mid-market and small-market teams don't have to use other avenues that the big-market teams can avoid by spending a bunch of money.
Okay, but in the NBA, teams were still doing that despite a salary cap.
Yes, because they had the option of tanking, but I'm not talking about... There's no value in tanking if you're the New York Yankees. You can buy your way back to success. You can't do that as the Baltimore Orioles. You can't do that in the NBA. There's no way to buy your way to success in the NBA.
The thing is, the Orioles tried to do what Buster Olney's suggesting by, adding free agents here and sort of retooling the team. They did that for about a decade and a half, and that led to literally zero success on the field. So
y'all were just like consistently middle bottom of Major League Baseball.
Right, but
we managed to stay ahead of the Rays back then.
You weren't bad enough to get a good
team.
draft pick, but you also weren't good enough to be in the playoffs.
Right, yeah. And, what good does that do anybody? So,
and the issue that the Orioles also had was that when they had young prospects that could have been potentially contributing major league players, they traded them away for, 35-year-old veterans. They were supposed to try to make the team good now, and they would win 65 games instead of, just 60. And be like, hey, we tried to win. They had one of the higher payrolls in the league for most of that run, and they never won more than 80 games.
Yeah. So, and the Orioles' issues... the reason they're so bad now, it's because they refuse to invest in the international market at all. And they made a lot of dumb decisions, like Eric just alluded to, in 2014, 15, 16 area, in terms of trading away prospects to get old guys, and then just letting some free agents walk. And then replacing them with bumps, like Travis Snyder. So, it's more than one issue. It's not that the team won't spend, because there's no point spending money on a team that's terrible. There's so many problems, and, it can't just be fixed with the stroke of a pen.
No, and it kind of reminds me of, there's an episode of Beverly Hills 90210 where, you understand anything about this show, it's a bunch of privileged-ass white kids, that live in Beverly Hills. Well, at one point, one of these kids, who's now a college-age person, she goes out to a poor neighborhood, and this single mother is working 2 jobs to support her kid, and so she's not at home, and the kid goes and gets into a little bit of, not real trouble, but, he's out there running around the streets and stuff. And so mom comes home at 10 o'clock at night after working 2 shifts, and privileged white girl is telling mom, what the hell's wrong with you? How can you not be taking care of your kid? It's like, this is the life I have to live. This is how I have to get it done because things have gone wrong for me. I don't have the luxury of working 1 job and getting paid a bunch of money. Okay, this is how it works. You can't speak to me and tell me what I need to do when you haven't given me the tools to actually be able to do it your way. So I find it all so ridiculous because, again, the worst year in that stretch, the Orioles were not trying to rebuild. They were committed to winning, and they still found a way to only win 47 games.
Yes.
They were just that bad because the experiment they tried to do everything but accept the fact that the window had closed and it's time to reset. They decided not to do that, and they ran headlong into a 47-win season despite the fact that they had one of the best players in the league on their team that they had to promptly trade away. So there was absolutely nothing the Orioles could do. There was nothing to build off of. It was just a smoldering husk.
Right.
There was nothing left. There were no prospects in the farm system. The payroll was high in 2018. It wasn't like they could just say, hey, let's go add more free agents. Adam Jones was over the hill. Chris Davis is still on the payroll now, let alone 3 years ago.
Despite being under the hill.
Yeah, despite the fact that he had $92 million on the books. Mark Trumbo was still being paid a bunch of money, despite the fact that he sucks and couldn't stay healthy. I mean, they had a ton of money invested in a bunch of dudes that were sub-replacement level players. What the hell are you supposed to do other than say, okay, let's trade what we've got, let's reset, let's build the farm system up, let's figure out how the hell we can actually get an analytics department in here, let's find a way to invest in international spending, And frankly, the Major League team's going to struggle for a few years because they have no choice but to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they have been successful in building up the farm system. The Orioles farm system is ranked higher than it's ever been, according to whatever publication that ranks them. And, the Bay Sox are doing well. The Iron Birds are doing well. The Shorebirds are doing well.
Adley just got called up to AAA.
Adley just got called. He waits until I can go see him play, and he's gone. Really? Really?
Still see gas can.
Yeah, the Bay Sox are playing home games this week. So, the rebuild is working. It's just going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Rome wasn't built in a day, and particularly when you're starting from literally nothing, expecting it to turn around so quickly is just not going to happen.
I will say this. I do hope that the Orioles try to find some guys that can actually pitch next year, because I can't deal with this another season.
The thing is, they did, right?
Yeah, again, the guys that they're using this year, Keegan Aiken and Dean Kramer.
Oh, my God.
They were supposed to be guys that we thought could pitch. They can't. They suck.
Yeah, Keegan Aiken last night, 3 innings, 6 earned runs.
Yep. Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So his ERA is up over 8 now.
I mean, yeah, these dudes, they're not just throwing random guys out there. These guys were hoping to contribute to the Major League roster at some point. They can't. This is how it works. You can't just sit there and say, well, screw those young guys. Don't give them a chance. Go sign veterans who might give you 5 more wins a year.
Well, they signed Matt Harvey.
Yeah, and he stinks.
Yeah.
He's been good lately, but generally he stinks. His ERA is still over 7.
How's Felix Hernandez doing right now? They signed him too.
He's not around.
Out of the league.
He's gone.
So, just don't tell Trey Mancini that the team's not trying, right? He struck out a couple times and had a meltdown. His equipment was strewn all the way up the first base line because he struck out to end 1 inning. So you can't tell him that, the team's not trying. They're trying as hard as they can. And, it's going to take some patience from Orioles fans and from non-Orioles fans alike.
Yeah, I mean, I could nitpick the things that the Orioles have done in the Mike Elias era. I thought they should have brought back Iglesias to play shortstop, but in the end, what good would that really have done long term? Would that have resulted in the Orioles winning the pennant?
No.
Would it have resulted in them going 500? No. Would it result in them winning 65 games? No. No, he's not making up 9 games by himself. No chance. So what are the options? The options are you're going to suck because you got absolutely nothing to work with. So you got to try to fix that. It takes time. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. Is that everything on here?
Got a few things from outside of our 2 teams.
Okay.
So Mookie Betts is hurt again. He spent a little bit of time on the IL a couple weeks ago. Came back, played a little bit of second base, going back to what he came up as. Played pretty well, went back to the outfield, but then he's dealing with that lower leg injury again. I believe it's a hip issue, and so he's likely going to head back to the IL. Fernando Tatis might be heading to the outfield. What's that all about, Eric?
Phil, he's got repeated shoulder injuries from a separated shoulder that probably is going to need a more severe action taken in the offseason to fully repair. So they're figuring he's a safer bet to not re-aggravate the injury playing in the outfield. So they're willing to try to move him there for the time being so that they can have him back in the lineup quicker. I think it's a fine idea. I mean, I know that there's obviously risk in the outfield as well.
You're throwing further. I know you're generally not throwing quite as hard as you are from shortstop, but you're throwing further.
It's not about the throwing. It's about diving. It's like the fact that playing shortstop, you're laying out a lot.
Yeah.
And while you could run into the wall playing the outfield, and you could end up having to dive playing the outfield, it happens far less regularly than it does in the infield. So they're figuring the re-injury risk is significantly lower playing the outfield. And since he's the best damn hitter in baseball, you kind of would like to have him back in the lineup for the pennant run.
If only they could DH him,
Well, yeah, I know.
That makes too much sense.
We already talked about the Red Sox kind of collapsing and the Rays surging past them and taking a pretty significant lead in the AL East, but in the NL East, 5 games. In the NL East, the Mets have collapsed, and the Phillies are surging. The Phillies are 5 games above 500. They're a game up of the Braves, 2 up of the Mets. The Phillies are 8-2 over the last 10 games, while the Mets are 2-8. So they've blown a little bit of a lead there in the East. And
come out of that.
if you want to win that division, or if you want to make it to the playoffs out of that division, you have to win that division, because right now it's looking like it's going to be 3 teams from the West.
I don't think anybody wants to win this
Cincinnati is still sort of in the conversation, but they're like 6.5 games back.
Yeah, they had a rough week. They were getting closer, but then they lost a few games.
I mean, they're 6-4 over the last 10, so they're not dead in the water, but they're about 6 games back of the Padres right now for that second wild card spot.
And at least it's just a terrible division.
Yeah. Despite all the money that the Mets have spent and all the big names they added, I still feel like the Braves are the best team, without Ronald Acuna Jr. and Mike Soroka.
Yeah, I just feel like the Phillies are more healthy right now, though, and
the Phillies are still negative in the run differential department.
It doesn't matter here. This is the NL East, baby. Yeah. Who cares? I mean, jeez, I think the Phillies end up winning the division just purely on health.
I don't believe in the Phillies.
I don't believe in them either. I think they're going to get washed in the playoffs, but I don't believe in the Braves. Where the hell have the Braves been all season?
Under 500.
Yeah, exactly. So how am I supposed to trust them? I mean,
where have the Phillies been all season?
Well, they're doing what I expected the Phillies to do. The Braves have been a disappointment.
Yeah, it's like there's no team in this division that you can count on.
Not at all.
One of these teams is going to make the NLDS, and they're going to get, I think, very easily swept by the Brewers. Just, sort of procedurally.
The Phillies might win one if Zach Wheeler pitches well.
Maybe.
But yeah, because the Brewers don't hit. So.
Yeah.
All right, so last thing on our sheet, this past week the Marlins were playing in Colorado against the Rockies, and outfielder Lewis Brinson was at the plate, and video went viral on social media. Somebody was watching the game, heard a fan in the background shouting something that I guess they heard it and it sounded a lot like the N-word, and so they posted on social media. It went viral. I saw it, and with that in mind, I felt like I heard the N-word shouted twice, potentially directed at Lewis Brinson. In the aftermath of it, somebody posted another video and suggested that the fan in question may have been yelling to get the attention of Dinger, the Rockies mascot. And I'll be honest, with that in mind, when I watch it, I can hear Dinger. It's not 100% clear. It's not crystal clear audio. There is some sort of just background noise and other stuff that garbles it a little bit. So it was sort of a situation where whichever one was in my mind, that's what I heard. It was almost like that whole Laurel and Yanny thing from several years back.
The blue dress and the white dress.
Or the blue dress and the white dress, good lord. Regardless, when he was asked about it, Lewis Brinson said that he's seen it about 50 times or so, and he keeps hearing the N-word. He's not completely shutting out the idea that it may have been somebody trying to get the attention of Dinger, their mascot. And if that's the case, he said that he's sorry that not so much sorry, but he feels bad that the fan is going through all of this. Certainly, if you didn't say the N-word, it would suck to be accused of saying it. But it's one of those things where, you want to be careful to an extent of what you put on social media. You want to try and verify these things, but it's also, one of those situations where it's, the time that we're in today, it's sad that we can hear something like that, and regardless of whether the person actually was saying the N-word or not, you can hear that and be like, I don't even know if I really need to question that too much, because I could totally see somebody, one person out of all these fans, doing that.
Yeah. I watched the clip. It sounded like the N-word to me, but I don't think that's what was said, just because watching the clip and looking at the other fans in the clip, nobody looked horrified or shocked or anything. People just sat there like it was nothing. Like, I didn't see any reaction from anybody that something out of the ordinary had happened.
I mean, even with that, so there was a, I forget if it was like a city hall or a state legislation meeting or city legislation meeting or something recently where one of the legislators got up and referred to a black woman on the same council as he was on by the N-word. And nobody reacted particularly horrified to that either. So, like, I don't even necessarily want to base my belief on what he did or didn't say on the reactions of those around them because, you know, that lack of a horrified look could be indicative of either of two things, at least that come immediately in mind. One, you don't care because you're also racist, or B, you're just like, damn it, like, just another day at the park with this kind of bull crap, like, you know, what's gonna be next in this country?
I didn't see that reaction either, though. I just saw no.
You certainly hope that the fan was just trying to get the attention of the mascot, and you know, if it's the fan that the second video that came out, if it is that same fan and that, you know, that was the fan who was saying it, he's pointing in the general direction of where you would expect the mascot to be. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfectly legitimate excuse for what happened, an explanation of what happened.
Yeah, I know we live in times where people are more comfortable than anybody would hope with being overtly racist, but at the same time, I feel like when I've got two possible scenarios, I've got a fan that's, you know, pointing and looking at a mascot named Dinger and seemingly trying to get his attention. He even did like a little wave at him. Or some crazy asshole goes to the park and starts screaming the N-word at a batter in the batter's box. I don't see scenario 2 as super plausible when I look at scenario 1 and see a clear, plausible story here. Now, when I first saw the video, I heard what everybody heard, which is a slur that was clearly meant to be directed at somebody, and nobody looked at that and said, "Oh, he couldn't have possibly said that." It wasn't until there was some context added that maybe we misinterpreted. But it's like the same thing with Bubba Wallace with the noose in his garage at Daytona or wherever that was, where it was like...
It was Talladega.
Talladega, thank you. And at the time, it was like, there's no way in hell, without any further context, that this could be anything but racist. Mm-hmm. And then you get some extenuating circumstance that seems to prove that it's not. And it's like, okay, at that point, with new information, we've adjusted the way we think about this. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't see any issue with being proactive about it. People were saying, well, this minimizes actual racism by jumping to conclusions. I'm like, no, the conclusion was perfectly legitimate to jump to. There's no reason not to jump to that conclusion. It was an insane circumstance that led to this potentially not being what we thought it was. Same thing with Bubba Wallace. Like, how the hell am I supposed to know that he's looking at a mascot that's named Dinger and he's yelling it, and it just so happens to also sound like a slur? Because Dinger and the N-word don't sound that much alike. Like, they really don't. But in this circumstance, it seems like based off of maybe the guy's inflections, the way he speaks,
the poor quality of the audio.
The audio as well. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could have led to this, but to me, it seems plausible. So I'm willing to accept that.
Yeah, and you know, the other thing in this situation that's different than some other situations where maybe we jump to a conclusion is that, you know, the initial video that most of us saw didn't have anybody's face in it. We didn't know who the fan was. Like, this was not a situation where you could, you know, single out a particular fan and be like, yeah, that guy's a racist, and start like, you know, attacking his character. You know, it really was just wow, somebody said the N-word at a baseball game toward a player. We need to, like, make sure this doesn't keep happening. Like, this should not be happening. And from that standpoint, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, even if it turns out that we were wrong about what was said, I don't think that does any harm within the scope of bringing attention to the fact that there are people who are too comfortable with that word, and we need to not be comfortable with that word.
Yeah, pretty simple.
So
the Rockies mascot is a big purple dinosaur. So
Why not just name him Barney then?
Well, because he's not a T-Rex, he's a Triceratops.
Yeah.
Oh.
When they were building the stadium, they found a Triceratops skull in the ground there.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that. That's cool.
They also had him hatch from an egg on the first game at Coors Field.
Really?
Yeah, it was
I
pretty
think I
fun.
did know that.
It was pretty fun.
I know
enjoyed
the
the video.
Nationals mascot, like, the first year or so at RFK was just this big egg walking around, and then it hatched into an eagle.
Was Screech, which is an abomination of a mascot.
Waited all that time for this.
Well, the thing is that they've made Screech more palatable. That he used to be really fat, which no shade to anybody that's dealing with weight issues. I mean, especially with what happened with Skip Bayless today. We don't want to go down that path, but he didn't really look like an eagle. He looked like a chicken, and I'm like, I don't think that's what you're going for, guys. And now he still looks uninteresting. He's got that big stupid smile on his face, but at least he looks like an eagle. Yeah. He doesn't look very intimidating though. He's not like Slapshot. Slapshot's a way cooler eagle.
What about the Philadelphia Eagles eagle?
Yeah, I like him better than Screech too. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so
I like the Oriole bird better than Screech too.
Oh yeah.
before we get out of here, so every week, we title our show after something that's, something funny that was said, or usually it's something funny or a faux pas that was said on the show. We always decide that off air, and we'll do that again today. But in the section where we can write down ideas for titles, there's a whole soliloquy that I don't know what this is, and I don't know which of you wrote it.
Okay, so that was me. While you were talking, I was not paying attention to what I was doing on my phone. I accidentally had it voice recording, like voice to text thing. So it just typed in all the stuff you were saying.
So I just want to read what voice recording thought that we were saying on the show during that time frame. So it says, "Our young girl who are younger like you said ukulele. Yes, CJ, who are younger, but we all go away. I know that Corey gets it. Whatever, yeah. I want to know how to pronounce his name, as I want to pronounce them correctly. I'm not trying to butcher his players' names like he deserves to have an SNL correctly, but some of them are difficult, so I apologize for my wife."
Yeah.
So I figured that was funny. I just left it in.
In case you ever wanted to know if your phone is stupid.
That's what I thought. I figured it was a Mike thing, but I wasn't sure if it was mine or somebody else's that did it. But okay.
Yeah.
There's that.
Yeah. I noticed it right away. I'm like, you know what? I'm just leaving that.
Oh my goodness. So that was during the whole, me mispronouncing. I was mispronouncing CJ.
Don't try it.
It's DJ.
DJ Uiagalelea.
We'll try again next week.
Oh, is that not right?
No, that was not right.
Damn it.
Put a little time in. We'll
Any shout outs for you guys as we wrap up today's show?
I got shout out to Trey Turner for having the most buttery smooth slide I've seen in a long time.
Oh my goodness.
That was even better
beautiful to watch.
backwards.
Yeah, it was excellent. I was definitely into that. That was cool.
I could just watch that all day.
I've
Evan,
watched it several times.
Any shout outs for you?
I mean, shout out to my dad and my grandfather. We went to the Orioles game Sunday. Shout out to my aunt and my sister who went to Hershey Park on Monday. Shout out to everybody for being safe out on the road and stuff. Well, I've driven like 1,000 miles the past 5 days.
And my shout will be for my cross-country athletes. We start practice tomorrow for the season. 80 days until WCAC championships. It's our conference championship. So shout out to those guys as we get set to start things up. That'll do it for episode 154. It's our second episode of season 4 of our show. Can't believe that, in fact, I think yesterday, the day before, I got an alert on Facebook from 3 years ago when I posted something on my Facebook about us getting things started with this show. So,
oh, wow.
Really excited to be going into year 4 with you guys, and we'll be doing some contests for game picks with the football season coming up, so keep an eye out for that. We'll be posting Google Forms invites on our Twitter page for everybody to go in and make the picks there instead of sending them to our email this year. We got fantasy football around the corner, less than a month until our draft. So a lot of stuff coming up for us.
Shout out to our friend of the show, Scott Hansen. I cannot wait for that first Sunday of Red Zone.
We get 18 weeks of that this year.
18 weeks.
18 weeks.
Yes. I'm not doing anything on any Sunday afternoon. I'm busy. I'm sorry.
So that'll do it. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon. We're on all those platforms. If you listen somewhere else and would like to find us there, let us know so we can get our podcast there. Be sure to leave a review, rating, all that good stuff. Follow us on Twitter at SportsBallers18. You can also follow us individually at Corey Puffett, at Quagmire67, and at Evan_Ash13. And like us on Facebook so that you can listen to our live shows every week. Don't know yet if it'll be Monday or Wednesday next week, but probably Monday, I guess.
That's up to y'all.
Probably Monday, I think, next week.
I have other stuff to do.
I have a coaches meeting Wednesday, and they've got another game, I think. So, yeah, probably Monday next week. But then after that, we'll be transitioning back to Wednesdays either the following week or a week later. So keep an eye out for that on Facebook, and make sure you're subscribed so that as soon as we upload to your favorite podcast app, it just downloads it right to your phone. Be safe out there. Enjoy the week. Thank you all so much for listening. For Evan and Eric, I'm Corey Puffett, and we'll see you next time on the Sports Ballers podcast.